Hello and welcome to the January edition of Coffee with the Pastors. I'm Pastor Daniel Hanson and joined today by Pastor Dan Dahl and Pastor Dan Gerrietts. We invite you to grab your favorite beverage and join us for a time of conversation as we explore a little bit about what's going on in Trinity's life and mission. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Now, have you made the mental shift to 2023? Every time I see 2023, I still feel like I'm looking at the Jetsons in the future, that's not a date that's possible. But are the calendars up on the wall? Are we starting to make that mental shift?
It's here. I like that Jetsons phrase.
It does feel like 2023 it's a very futuristic year.
It does.
Those numbers, I agree. It feels very futuristic. Yeah.
We'll try to live in the present, but there's something fun about a new year in the opportunity to look back on the past year. And at least for the last couple of years, I think it's been really interesting to look back and think what life was like a year ago at this time, as so much of life has changed year to year as we come through the pandemic. But I thought that could be a fun exercise for us to start with today, is think back to Trinity 2022, which may have felt like a futuristic year a year ago and now seems like ancient past. But maybe we could start today thinking about what was Trinity like back a year ago. And one thing I think is interesting is only one of us has any context to what that was like.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I know that Dan Dahl, that we spoke in person pretty close to about a year ago. This time I know you were in town and we had coffee together, and so I know you were around a little bit. But yeah, I've been trying to remember exactly what it was like. It's a little bit hard sometimes to think back, and in some ways, now that we aren't doing a lot of in terms of restrictions around COVID for everybody, systematically, it's hard to remember exactly when that phase started. But I'm thinking back a year ago, I'm thinking we were still masked in worship. I think that we were definitely still not doing some things that are pretty regular core pieces of our life together, like in-person Wednesday Night Alive and doing the meal on Wednesday Night Alive. Coffee, I think we started about a year ago, but there were just those kind of things, those community gathering sort of things that we were still not doing some of those. And I think still kind of tiptoeing our way into whatever the new normal that was developing. I think one thing that sticks in my mind just in thinking back on the last 12 months is how much we've seen people come back to in-person activities, whether that be worship or whether that be committee meetings and Bible studies and service activities and just social things at church. I think back to a year ago, we were still not seeing in person a lot of people. We were together through technology and virtually other ways, but it was really significant, I think, through the end of 2022 in particular, like from kind of the summer on, to watch larger numbers appear in worship again, and watching Sunday school get back up and running in earnest, fully, and all of those sort of things. Confirmation, right? Those sort of things definitely changed a lot in the last 12 months. And sometimes it feels like that was about 5 years ago that we kind of got back to it, because we've just been back in the flow now for a little while. But actually, it wasn't all that long ago, and things were very different. But what about for you guys? I mean, how is it? Because you've both been here since at least about half of the last year. I mean, what have you seen that's different in your time?
Well, one thing, when we get out and go to the different nursing homes and assisted living and Good Shepherd and so on, there's a more of a freedom to go in and out of these places, as before there was not. And every now and then they'll have a mask mandate for people in working and so on. But so I know the people receiving visitors and even those volunteers who go out and visit, whether it's in prayer or communion, feel free to do that. Whereas before they were hesitant. That hesitancy, I think, is dissipated. and even in making the home visits too.
Sure.
I think for me, this was the first holiday season that felt more like it had in the past. And maybe just around worship and yeah, for some reason this year that felt different, right? That felt like a little bit more like it had before. But I yeah, for me, I would echo whether it was a year ago in Hampton or a time here in Mason City, the sense of community coming together, and that being the COVID not being the only determining factor in whether some of those things happened or not. And certainly it's still here with us, right? We're still navigating the pandemic. We're still navigating transmission, and no idea what tomorrow will bring with those things. But it feels like there's a path forward. Whereas before there was times in the years previous where there's like, what's going to happen? Like, and now it feels like there's a little more clarity of how we can still faithfully care for our neighbors but still be together in community as well.
Well, that's one of the things, we've talked about. I keep thinking back to particularly the first year and a half of the pandemic, when it just felt like this could go on forever. There was no clear path to the end in sight. We were kind of sitting around waiting for something big to change, whether that was a treatment for COVID or the vaccinations to be done or whatever was going to be kind of a game changer that would help us move to a different point. I just remember thinking, I think like a lot of people did in a lot of different areas of life, like, will it ever be like it was before? Even if it's a little bit different, like, will we ever gather huge numbers of people in a sanctuary to worship ever again? Or will we ever be able to shake hands again? Some of those kind of questions I remember thinking about and even wondering, a little more deeply, particularly in the early days of the pandemic, of what would happen to churches, what would happen to ministries? Would this absolutely tear things down in an irreparable way? Those were very, I think, real and I would say fairly valid concerns at the outset of the pandemic, and nobody really knew how we were going to get through this and what it would look like on the other side. And I think that's been a source of gratefulness for me as I think about and reflect about God's goodness and faithfulness through even the most unexpected, most disruptive kind of period, certainly in my life. To be where we are now and to look back is really makes me grateful and makes me really think about God's faithfulness, particularly now as we're getting ready for new member classes here. And we're getting all of our new leadership in place. And I think, we finished the year strongly at Trinity financially, and all of that stuff kind of points to the fact that, there's a lot of life and vitality here on the other side of the pandemic for us as a congregation too, and as well as for us as individuals. And for that, I'm incredibly grateful and can't say really that I knew for sure that would be the case 3 years ago or two and a half years ago. So.
There is a real strong sense of vibrancy here. It's incredible here at Trinity. It's a blessing to be here during this time. And that bazaar, when that happened, breaking all records of attendance and people talking and joyfully laughing and having a great time. That was a blessing. It was really nice.
For me, the whole sense of having lost what we did during that amount of time, specifically the loss of being together with other people. I think I always knew those things were important, but to be able to celebrate those things again, it shows what a vibrant part of community is as a congregation, right? This isn't just our single journeys with Jesus. This is the journey we get to take together. And whether that's a fellowship coffee like we had this past week, whether it's coffee fellowship Sunday morning, whatever the activity, not to take for granted that opportunity to get to know our neighbors and grow in community has been a joy.
Well, and I think too, if I could just add one more thing, I think the pandemic from the very beginning has prepared us and emboldened us as a community of faith, and maybe beyond that too, but particularly I'll speak for us here. I think it's emboldened us to be open to innovation and change in ways that we were not before. There was something about having everything turned upside down and most everything taken away that suddenly made us go, Yeah, we could adapt our worship scheduler. Yeah, we could try a church-wide service day, or yeah, we could, it just made us kind of go, what's the worst that could happen? It could be another failure, and we'll learn and we'll move on, and I just, as I reflect on what has really changed, I think that's the piece that I continue to, there's just a different feel about what's really at stake when we look at doing things differently. We're not quite as afraid, I think, to go, let's try this differently for the sake of mission and for the sake of new life. Let's give this a try and see what happens. And because we know, like, we went like over a year hardly without being able to gather in person, and God's mission survived, right? And we survived as people. So all of that changes your perspective on things that used to feel like, ooh, that could really disrupt things, and that would be bad, like I think that's been one of the gifts too, looking back at this point.
That can create a lot of excitement for what's to come this year as we try some different things. And as I say, maybe not all of them will work exactly like we hope they do, but there might be some fertile ground for new things to grow that a couple years ago we couldn't have imagined.
Yeah.
But the annual meeting will be coming up soon, and that's a great chance that we take as a congregation to look back on the year together and to celebrate some of the different shared ministry that we've had together. Pastor Dan, do you want to share just a little bit about the details of the annual meeting so that folks know when that is and how to participate coming up soon?
Absolutely. So last Sunday of this month, the 29th of January at noon, we'll gather in the fellowship hall. And annual meetings at Trinity are oftentimes a chance for us to do exactly what we've been doing, to kind of look back on the year and to highlight some things that we feel are really important, to talk certainly about some of the nuts and bolts of ministry. We'll talk about budgets. We'll talk about giving the past year, those sort of things. We'll talk about the remaining T150 loan and how that's kind of going. But we're also going to look ahead into this coming year and talk about some of the things that are going to be happening in the coming year. So it's a great chance to kind of get deep details on those things right here out of the gate. So one of the things that will be on the agenda will be an update on the columbarium that's coming at Trinity and that process that's going along with that. And another piece is the legacy giving committee. What used to be planned giving has done some really great work to sort of reboot and reimagine themselves. They took a bit of a break during our capital appeal, just because that felt like the right thing to do. But they're sort of refocusing the way that legacy fund is going to help Trinity's mission and ministry in the years to come. And so we're going to be voting on a resolution that will allow that reorganization to happen, and be hearing presentations from some of those people about what that means for us as a congregation going forward. There'll also be a little bit of talking about some of the things a little further out on the horizon. One of the things that our council leadership has begun to have conversations about is how Trinity can be a partner in ministry to other places of ministry, other congregations, as a congregation with some resources in our area, and I think a pretty good vision for mission and ministry, how we can come alongside some congregations, help them revitalize and become stronger too. So we'll be talking a little bit about that as well at the annual meeting. The thing though that I really need to announce, as Pastor Dahl said before we hopped on here, is we're gonna have a meal at 11:30 on that Sunday between the 10:30 service and between the start of the annual meeting at noon. And Gene, if those of you that know Gene that used to cook at Pies and More, he's going to cook lunch for us right at 11:30, from 11:30 to noon. And he's going to cook cream chicken over biscuits, mashed potatoes, a vegetable side, and brownie. And every single time that we mention that to anybody so far, they're like, "Oh, I'm coming to the meal." They might not stay for the meeting. They might not stay for the annual meeting, but they're coming to the meal. So that's going to be a free will offering meal. And we're actually going to have some youth maybe helping with that. And they're going to use the offering as a fundraiser for some of their activities that are coming up too. So no need to sign up for the meal. You can just come. But 11:30 meal, noon meeting, Sunday, January 29th.
Awesome. Be there. Going to be an awesome lunch and even better meeting if possible.
Sounds great.
Oh, and I should mention too, if you want to join online, you can do that. You just need to sign up in advance through our website to get the link to join us on Zoom.
Awesome. So great way for people to attend. So excellent. Well, looking ahead past the annual meeting, I know for a lot of pastors, you can't see past the annual meeting too far, but we're trying to look past the annual meeting into the exciting year. And before we know it, it will be the season of Lent. Lent comes in February. Ash Wednesday is the 22nd this year, but we've started some Lenten planning and have exploring a Lenten theme for the year. And we'd like to share a little bit about that today.
Yeah, is that me too? You want me to talk about that?
Yeah, do you want to introduce the theme, and then Dan can share about some of the tactile things we're doing?
You bet. You bet. So, so throughout Lent this year, we are going to center around a theme that is the cross of healing. Cross of healing. We know that the cross is always at the center of our faith and certainly of the Lenten journey. But we're going to do that. We're going to focus on the cross in some really intentional ways this year, both in the weekends in worship, in our midweek services throughout Lent, and also in some special ways beyond worship, through some kind of faith and wellness challenge work. So I'll just say this, each weekend we're going to talk about how the cross brings healing in different ways. So one weekend we're going to focus on how the cross is healing of our sin. Another weekend we'll talk about how it's for the healing of relationships, for the healing of creation, for the healing of the world, for the healing of our mind, body, and spirit. Each week we're going to look at a different one of those. And then on the midweek services, the regular Wednesday services in Lent, we're going to do a very different style of worship than what we typically do at Trinity. We're going to do a service called Prayers Around the Cross. And we're going to gather in the gathering space for those Wednesday midweek services around a cross for a service of Taizé music, very repetitive, very easy to learn, silence and contemplation. And then we're going to have these tactile activities that will be a part of those midweek services each week, something that we can do with our hands or experience with our different senses as people. And that's going to be a really different style of worship, a little bit shorter than normal, but I think a really unique and fun way to really gather around the cross, both spiritually and physically. There's also a neat activity that we're going to do kind of as a discipline throughout Lent, and that involves some nails and a large cross. And Pastor Dahl, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure.
The nail discipline, or what? I don't know what are we calling this? What is this called?
Well, this is called simply the nail. No, but this is a masonry nail right here. You can see it's something that you can even put in your pocket. It doesn't have a point like a carpenter's nail, but it's similar like a spike that spiked the hands of Jesus Christ on the cross and his feet. And what it is, it's an opportunity to receive this nail on Ash Wednesday, which is February 22nd. I believe there's a service in the afternoon and in the evening where you can come, and there'll also be nails available for that. But it begins to help us picture Jesus Christ on the cross being nailed there because of our sins. And of course, the nail does represent that. And it also reminds us of the Lord's suffering and the Lord's humanity, and to be able to understand our suffering and to be with us during this time, and the power to do something about it, being the Son of God and of course Son of humanity. And so, but the whole point of having this nail is to hang on to it in a very visible place, whether it's with you or somewhere around where you are during the week, and a daily reminder of the Lord, so that on Good Friday, this nail is pounded into a cross that is being made by Pat Marshall. He's making that out of wood. It'll be a very large cross, and he's excited about being part of this ministry. He's checked in every now and then saying, well, we got the stand, he brought that in already, and now he's getting the cross. And we'll be placing that cross horizontally during the Good Friday service in the front of the sanctuary, so that you may come forward and then pound this nail into the cross. And then that cross will be wrapped in mesh wire, so that on Saturday night for the Easter service, and then Sunday for the Easter services, you come with some flowers that maybe you got at the local store somewhere. We'll have flowers available, and you place that in the mesh wire, and parents can lift the kids up, and put those flowers on, and that becomes an Easter cross. So we make that journey through the cross on Good Friday and then to Easter. And this same cross is going to be used during the Wednesday night services. So that in the first service, when concerning healing our sins, it'll be placed horizontally on some tables, and then around that, we'll be having some sand in containers with candles to be lit. And then also, I believe it's going to be about relationships. It'll be with limestone or some rock representing our burdens, which we bring to the Lord. And then I believe in creation, we may be dealing with some plants of some kind to remind us, and that'll be around the cross, some greenery. And then for the healing of the body, mind, and spirit, we'll be having lots of ointment. So.
I'm excited for these worship opportunities. I think the way it's structured is a really interesting way of exploring a theme on Sunday morning, but then living that as part of a prayer and worship practice on Wednesday. I think I'm hopeful will be a really powerful experience for us to look to the cross as a place of healing, and to bring our struggles, to bring our burdens, to leave them there, and to know that healing comes from what Jesus has done for us. So I'm excited. I'm excited for trying something new. So maybe this is an example of trying something a little bit outside the box. So we're hopeful people are open to that, but I think it could be a really powerful experience as we make that Lenten journey together to Easter. So there's more to come on that. So we don't want to spoil all the excitement about what's coming in Lent. So we'll be able to share a little bit more about Ash Wednesday and some of those things in future episodes. Well, something else exciting that we had going on in January here at Trinity was Camp Sunday. And I know I'm biased here that I love summer camp, but I have been looking forward to Camp Sunday for a while. And we were really blessed on Sunday, January 8th, to kick off our Sunday school semester with Riverside Bible Camp coming to worship for Camp Sunday. And it was really great to have Gabby and Lizzie come from Riverside and share a word from the camp about their theme for the year and about all the different programs that they're offering. And I thought we could chat a little bit today about our own experiences with summer camp, and just talking for a second beforehand. It sounds like summer camp was really influential for each of us in our own faith formation. And so I thought it'd be fun to chat a little bit about some of those experiences, and then maybe that can be an encouragement for others who haven't gone to camp before, or are kind of on the fence to say, yes, this is a great opportunity for me. But I'm curious, did you go to camp growing up? I know we all worked at camp together, and we can talk about that in a second, because that's a little different experience from being at camp. But did you go to camp? Where was that? And what was that experience like for you, running around as an elementary or middle schooler at camp, meeting those cool camp counselors who were in college? What was that experience like? How did that help form your faith?
Well, I went to Riverside Bible Camp. We went there from Trinity. I always look forward to that. It was absolutely great. And of course, you remember the Bible stories and all this, and being inspired. I guess I was always impressed by the faith of the counselors. Here are these older folks who were not that old, but they inspired me, and it helped me understand that it's cool to have faith in Jesus, and then around the campfire, the songs, and just being in nature. And you also experience your own friends from the church in a different way. we can be in other organizations, sports, scouts, whatever. When you go to camp, it's a different way to get to know your good friends, and you get to meet friends and from other places. And that's always exciting. Then also, Trinity brought a group of us to Outlaw Ranch in South Dakota.
Hmm.
At that time, there was a pastor, I believe, Bruce Williams. I think he had some connection out there. And so we went there and had a great time. I'll always remember that, and it inspired my faith, to think outside the box. Of course, I love going to Sunday school and all these different ways, confirmation, but you go to camp, it's you're out there with the Lord and the stars, and lots of great people.
Awesome. Dan, did you go to camp growing up, or where did you go?
Yeah, I did. My primary experience growing up at camp would have been actually family camp, which is a little bit different model than maybe what a lot of our kids do. I know Riverside does family camp, but I don't know how many of our families have attended there. But I went to Okoboji Lutheran Bible Camp as a kid for family camp each summer, which has been a big part of their ministry for a long time. And family camp is a lot like regular camp, except for you go as a whole family, you stay together as a family. And then typically what happens in the weekday mornings is there's a lecture teaching time for adults, and the kids are taken off in age groups to do activities with counselors. The other cool thing about family camp is each family is assigned their own counselor, kind of like each cabin has their own counselor with individual kid camp. In families, you get your own family counselor. That was always a very powerful experience for me. I got to go with my cousins. It was always a kind of a family reunion week to go to family camp together on my mom's side of the family. So all of my aunts and uncles and cousins on that side, we were all there at the same time and kind of grew up every summer having that week together at family camp. And I think part of the power of that was intergenerational ministry in really powerful ways. I mean, literally doing a week together with your family all mixed together was pretty memorable. But yeah, I think the real magic and the way that the Spirit really uses outdoor ministries and has for generations is having this population of young adult, college age counselors that are really leading the ministry. There's a certain energy and creativity and just sense of fun that comes, and also passion. I think that's an age group that oftentimes you have a real deep passion for your faith as you're really kind of molding and forming it yourself as an adult individual. And that makes for really powerful ministry, along with the way that the Spirit works in the outdoors, which we know is always kind of special and powerful. Anytime you get away from your day-to-day life, God can do some pretty powerful things. So that was my primary experience growing up. I did a little bit of individual camp. I honestly didn't enjoy that as much as family camp. But for me, it was that connection to family camp that led me to eventually be a counselor and receive a call to ministry during my summer on staff, one of my summers on staff at Okoboji. So yeah, really, really important. Really, really important for me. Yeah. What about you, Daniel?
Yeah, we had a really unique arrangement where our church in Osage would rent out a camp in Floyd, Iowa, in the great metropolis of Floyd. And so they would bring in, like, it would almost be like day camp from either Iwalu or Riverside. Counselors would come in and lead 3 days of camp. And besides Little League, which was my favorite part of the summer camp was my second favorite part of the summer. And what I remember about it in pretty vivid detail were being able to be with my friends, right? It was very much a community thing where we had whole cabins full of different grades. Like it was the thing to do. And so there was a lot of time spent in community with friends. The games, I remember the games. Bonkers that's the crazy game where they chase you with socks full of flour. But then even though singing was never my favorite thing, I always loved the music of camp. And the engagement and those songs are emblazoned in my memory right at this point. So I'm hopeful someday if I find that I lose my memory in older age, I hope that it's camp songs that I remember, right? So that so I'm singing camp songs to everybody. But like they're deep in there, right? Because these were the classics that were sung, and some of them generations old. And what's fun is I go back to camp today to visit. A lot of those songs are still being sung. We sang Days of Elijah in worship the other week as one of those classics. But yeah, that the worship it is a different kind of worship. I mean, it's a very energetic and creative worship. And that was something I always found really interesting growing up, because while I loved the tradition of what we did every Sunday, there was also the sense of doing it in a completely different space with different people, in different music styles and different creative ways, but yet we were still worshiping the same God. So I have all these different memories of different camp worships that we did. And yeah, I wouldn't trade those memories for anything. I think I've often said, if there's any time in my life that I could go back to, it'd either be weeks at camp or weeks on summer staff. Like, and not that sometimes those were hard times, right? Because as a camp counselor, it's not the easiest job in the world. But that sense of community, that sense of growing in faith, that sense of helping to form others when you don't have everything figured out for yourself, was really a joy-filled time. And I would echo, I feel like I heard my call to ministry at camp, my first summer working at camp, that was a moment to say, when I had been on staff for a summer, that yeah, this was what God was calling me to do, to be in public ministry. So I think one of the gems we have in our church is our camping ministry. And I'm always just a little bit sad not as many people get to participate in it as get to, the rest of the week. And if there was any dream I would have, is that every kid could go to camp at least once to try it out. And one thing I love about here at Trinity is that we try to do a lot as a church for those who want to go to camp, to make that possible for them. So we're very excited to offer camp scholarships, both to Trinity members and to their friends, $300 for each person, to help cover over half of a week's cost to camp. But we really want to make that experience possible for folks, because we ourselves have experienced how powerful that can be, and how life-changing that could be.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think about how long that's been going on. I mean, you look at what like our kids from Trinity do at Riverside in a given week, what the schedule looks like, kind of how it flows. It really hasn't changed that much from the mid 1990s when I was working on staff, or in the 80s when I was growing up. I mean, it hasn't, and I'm guessing maybe it hasn't changed that much from when Pastor Dahl went. Whenever.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's a lot of the same components. It's worship and games, and it's skits, and it's music, and it's meal times, and it's, and I think the reason probably it hasn't changed is because it works. It's effective. And there's obviously some things that are very different than what they were years ago. They show video clips of Marvel movies now as a part of chapel time. They certainly weren't doing that when I was growing up, and I know they weren't doing that when you were growing up.
Oh, no.
But the same basic idea is there. It's about the relationships, and it's about getting away, and it's about the Holy Spirit moving in powerful ways. And yeah, I know personally, again, talking about Okoboji, my family's first connection to that particular site goes back to when my grandmother was a little girl, and her mother, my great grandmother, was asked to go up and cook for some of the first kind of Danish Lutheran tent revivals. That's not what they called them, but that's basically what they were. They would set up tents in this spot next to the lake, and they would have this kind of retreat. And the pastor of the Lutheran church down by Audubon asked my great grandmother to cook, because she had 9 children, and so he knew that she could cook for a lot of people. And so my grandmother talked about remembering riding up in a car as a little girl on a pile of vegetables up to the camp. And then my parents met there, and all my siblings and I all worked at various outdoor ministry sites across the country. And yeah, I would echo that. It's just such an important thing for so many of us, not just in church leadership, though there's a high percentage of people in church leadership that have had time at outdoor ministries, but even across our congregation, there's so many people at Trinity that talk about what camp meant for them, whether it was Riverside or somewhere else. And those are great stories to tell, and a great reason that we continue to try to send kids for that experience. So I just echo what you said, Pastor Daniel. I think every kid should get that chance at least try it out.
Okay.
I think there's something special about being away. And I think camp provides a really amazing, safe place for us to be away, and whether that's in adult programming, which Riverside and other camps offer, or whether that's programming for kids, that chance to be away and to be in a safe and encouraging place. It's really special. And it allows us to set aside some of the things that drag us down each and every day, and allows us maybe to see just a little more clearly something new that God might be doing in our lives. So the early bird deadline for camp is coming up soon. That's going to be March 15th. It's a little cheaper if you sign up before the early bird deadline, but we'd love to help you out here at the church if you need any help navigating that process to sign up for camp. But we're excited to partner with Riverside again this year, not only for summer camp down in Story City, but also for Vacation Bible School, which will be coming up before we know it in June as well. So excited for that. Any other thoughts on camp before we wrap up today? We could sing a camp song before we go. That
Yeah, that's true.
maybe we'll spare everyone from that.
One thing about Ualu, when I was there, this is like early 70s, but they at that time they had 8 people for every counselor. That was their, whether it was elementary school, junior high, or high school. I don't know if that still continues, but it was 8 for every one, which was great, and just that was your group for that week.
Yeah, and I think Riverside has gone now to having 2 counselors in every cabin.
So they're
And so I
doing
think
that.
the cabins might be a little bit bigger, but I think the ratio may be pretty similar because
Yeah.
cabins can't be much bigger than a dozen, but they have 2
Right.
for every cabin.
So there are a lot of opportunities for conversation and so on, And of course, we always get things with other groups, always, And one of the things that the high schoolers did was go down the Turkey River into the Mississippi, which was quite a feat. And, lots of fun.
It was fun. A couple years ago at my dad's church, I had someone come up to me and say, "You were my camp counselor."
Yeah.
And that was a really, he's in, and I remembered him after he
Yeah.
introduced himself, but he's in seminary now. So it was really, which I take no credit for. But it was really fun to see and reconnect with him and just, as you said, see how special those relationships can be, even though they're maybe only 5 days long, what an impact a young adult can have in the lives of our
Well, you both having worked, isn't that something when all they come new, there's that excitement, then as they're all going, there's a sadness. And then you try to recoup for the next group, and it was just really on that angle, it was a lot of fun, but you get really close with the other counselors too, share faith and lots of fun. And that aspect is great too. For kids, hopefully someday to be a counselor.
A really great opportunity for any young adult who's looking for something to do over the summer. It's a fun-filled, wild, energetic summer.
Yes.
It's a lot. But again, if there was any time I could go back in my life, I think it would be working those summers just because of the experiences that are had, and a great opportunity for folks. So, well, we'll spare you all from singing our favorite camp song. We'll maybe rehearse for next time to see if we can make that Zoom worthy, or maybe we'll just forget about that as well. But until next time, we'll look forward to checking in with you again. But we'll look forward to next month's Coffee with the Pastors. But until then, may God's blessings follow you. Talk to you later.
Bye.